evening, everyone. Right. Hello, and a very good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for coming here. Today, we are looking forward to a very special speaker. She is going to talk about cruelty and forgiveness in Shakespeare. Professor Ruth Vanita would need no introduction, yet we shall nevertheless provide an introduction for her. So Professor Vanita is Professor of English and co-director, South and Southeast Asian Studies at the University of Montana. She is the author of many books, most recently the novel A Slight Angle, Penguin 2024, and the critical work Shakespeare's Revisions of History, Social Collusion, Violence and Resistance in 9 Plays, Primus 2025. She has published 2 collections of poems and another novel, Memory of Light 2020, which she translated into Hindi as Pariyon ke Beech, Rajkamal 2021. Her other books include The Dharma of Justice in the Sanskrit Epics, Debates on Gender, Varna and Species, OUP 2022, Love's Rite, Same-Sex Marriages in Modern India, Penguin 2005, updated edition 2022, Dancing with the Nation, Courtesans in Bombay Cinema, Speaking Tiger 2017, and Gender, Sex and the City, Urdu Rekhti Poetry 1780 to 1870, Orient Blackswan 2012. She has translated several works from Hindi to English, including Mahadevi Varma's My Family, and Portraits from Memory, forthcoming from Harper Collins 2025, and Ugra's Chocolate and Other Stories on Male Desire, Duke University Press 2006. She co-edited The Path-Breaking Same-Sex Love in India 2000, Penguin 2008, and edited and translated On the Edge, 100 Years of Hindi Fiction on Same-Sex Desire, Penguin 2023. Educated entirely in India, she taught for many years at Delhi University and the University of Montana. She co-founded Manushi, India's first nationwide feminist magazine, and volunteered as co-editor for 13 long years. A very warm welcome, Professor Vanita. We are really looking forward to your talk. If I may please request you to come and...
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to IIT, thanks to the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and especially to Dr. Basu, who organized the whole thing meticulously with a team of students.
There is a little, if I may interrupt, there is still a little thing to do before you can start. Divyanshu, we would like to sort of honor you in the traditional Assamese fashion with a gamusa.
Thanks. Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Willis. Thank you. Okay, so I mean, Shakespeare needs no justification since you're here to listen, but I thought for people who are maybe not literature people, just to remind ourselves why we still read Shakespeare, not only that he influenced every writer in English in the last 400 years, but he was the first to either record or invent thousands of words. These are just a few of them, and many of these are words that all of them are words that we still use today. Also, he invented all these idioms, many of which we still use today, like things like vanish into thin air and the be-all and the end-all, and so many such idioms, right? So these are just a few of them. So basically the talk today is based on this book, which argues that Shakespeare depicts villains inflicting cruelty on vulnerable individuals. But he shows that these cruel individuals are not like just villains acting on their own. They don't act in a vacuum, but that they are enabled by various people around them who either actively collude with them or passively by doing nothing at all and just watching, are too scared to or whatever, allow them to carry on and do what they do. And over time, Shakespeare also starts reversing the pattern and showing if society collaborated more, even somewhat passively, with the people who are the victims of this cruelty, then what would that do? It may not really do anything. It may really change the situation, but it makes us as the audience feel some consolation, maybe. Okay, just some background on how I got to this point of writing on Shakespeare. So in my first book, first academic book, Sappho and the Virgin Mary, I argued two things. One, that same-sex relationships are not marginal to English literature but central. The first great lyric poet in the Western canon is Sappho of Lesbos, from which comes the word lesbian, and virtually every major English poet from the Romantics onwards was influenced by her and wrote either about her or imitated her or something. And the second great symbol is the Virgin Mary and the female saints, who became symbols of female community, creativity, and power. And so I looked at art as well in this book. And I think over time I also taught a course on goddesses. I realized that cultures that do not have goddesses, how very different they are, goddess figures, goddess-like figures, because Virgin Mary is not a goddess technically, but she's very much worshipped as a goddess. So goddesses or goddess-like figures, a culture that doesn't have these is very different from ones that do have them. These are the plays that I covered, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but just some of them. So yeah, let's start with so when I wrote that first book, Sappho and the Virgin Mary, I realized that these patterns could be, I could take them backwards into look at Shakespeare and the medieval period, because Shakespeare was in my mind all the time when I was writing. But then I got distracted by other things, and I wrote on Indian literature a lot. But I still kept publishing articles on Shakespeare over this period. And finally, I came back to Shakespeare. Marjorie Garber has a book with a great title, which is Shakespeare After All. So you sort of come back to your first love, and so it was nice for me. So we have to take some of the examples of what I was saying about this pattern of collusion. Saying As You Like It. Nobody helps Rosalind and Celia. They all chatter about it. There's a lot of gossip going on around among other characters. The only one who supports them is this clown who goes along with them, right? And nobody helps Orlando either. Nobody really goes along with him, except Adam, this old man who's not much use but is very loyal to him. In Othello, which is the best example perhaps, we see that Desdemona is mistreated by her husband, slapped by him, finally killed by him, and nobody stands up. There are other men around there. Nobody stands up to help her or to object vocally to what the husband is doing. And this reminded me of the patterns that I had seen at Manushi of many women who used to come for help and legal aid and so on, who basically, if the family or nobody around stood up and helped these women, this escalating pattern of violence often led to their being murdered. Whereas if the family did stand up and got the woman back, then she was saved. In The Merchant of Venice, likewise, throughout the play, abuse is showered on Jews. The word Jew is used. People have counted, I don't remember the number, but scores of times. And except for one or two moments when it's just used descriptively, most of the time it's used as an abusive word, the dog Jew and things like that. The other words are coupled with it, the devil Jew and so on and so forth. In Hamlet, of course, as we know, almost everyone conspires against him. In Measure for Measure, the heroine, who is a nun, is likewise trapped and isolated, and she's just tossed around and bullied by various men, and has her allies all turn out to be fake. In King Lear, this pattern starts to turn around, and in the last plays it turns around even more. Let's look at As You Like It a little. So in As You Like It, I was the first to point this out in an essay, very early essay in 1990, that Celia and Rosalind are two cousins who are women, and they are very, very close friends, and they've grown up together from childhood. And then Rosalind is banished, and Celia decides to run away with her, and Rosalind dresses as a man and Celia as a woman, and they run as brother and sister. They run away together. Now they buy a house together. These are the only two women in Shakespeare who buy a house together, because Celia has money and she takes the money and uses it to buy a house. They set up a household, and but in this play I argued that Celia is in love with Rosalind. Rosalind is not in love with her, so it's a one-way love, and Celia expresses this love. She uses the language of marriage to express this love, and their behavior again reminded me of these young one of the things in studying Shakespeare is to I noticed how many things in Shakespeare, patterns in Shakespeare, are so similar to patterns in modern India. Say marriages arranged by the family versus runaway love marriages is one example. But how important the family is, that individuals don't just get up at 18 and leave and then see their parents twice a year. No, the parents matter very much to them, and they want to persuade them, and they want to keep in touch with them regularly. That is much more similar to modern India than, say, modern West, the modern West. So many of my, say, students in America can't understand, like, why do these people even bother about their parents who are refusing to let them get married? Just leave them behind. But, but it's just a different emotional pattern. So from 1980 onwards, there are these couples, young women couples, who either run away from their families to be together and to get married, or they persuade their parents and the families support their marriage. And then some of them commit joint suicide. So these patterns I wrote about in this book called Love's Rite, which comes in fact from a Shakespeare sonnet, the title. So, for instance, Celia uses this language of marriage to describe her love for Rosalind. She says, "Thou and I am one, shall we be sundered, shall we part, sweet girl?" And I noticed that this language of the sundered and one is from the marriage service at the time, right? God did teach that it should be never lawful to put asunder those whom thou by matrimony had made one. Now this people in the audience would be very familiar with this line. So even the illiterate people on attending weddings, you would hear this line again and again and again. So they would pick up these echoes which we may not pick up today. She uses the term sweet girl, not used by anyone else in Shakespeare, any other woman in this way. And Shakespeare uses a similar, in the sonnets, expresses a similar love to his beloved. I mean, I'm saying Shakespeare and his beloved, but let's say the male speaker in the sonnets to another man. Says, "Sweet boy, like prayers divine, thou mine, I thine." It's very much like Celia's language. Professor Basu had asked me to speak about queer Shakespeare, and I said I don't like the word queer. I don't use it, especially not, I don't use any identity term for historical texts where these terms are not used. But I do write about same-sex relationships in these texts. So Celia says to Rosalind, "Wilt thou change fathers? I will give thee mine." Change means exchange in the language of the day. Now the only relationship, of course, in which you exchange parents and you share the parents is in marriage. Consider the other person's parents your own. So Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, and 1 in 26 are addressed to this beautiful young man whom he calls my rose, my all, dear love, sweet boy. And despite all this, many critics today still try to argue. I think it's widely accepted that it is love, but many critics still try to argue, including quite important critics, that it's friendship. Of course, we don't go around addressing our friends as my rose and my all and sweet boy and so on. Apart from that, Eric Picquigney has shown that, say, in Sonnet 52, throughout the sonnets, there's extremely sexual language. It's pretty much on the surface. In Sonnet 52, the speaker compares himself to a rich man who can use his key, his blessed key, to unlock his sweet, locked up treasure. He also, in the same sonnet, compares the young man to a beautiful dress kept in a cupboard, which he takes out and wears on special occasions. Again, this is not the way you talk to a friend. And in Sonnet 87, he says, "Thus have I had thee. Thus have I had thee." Now, if a man was writing to a woman, "Thus have I had thee," we'd have no doubt that this is sexual, right? So, but because they're two men, you can try to explain it away. In these sonnets, the older man is named Will. He gives his name as Will, and that's of course short for William, which is why I think it's Shakespeare himself. But even if we want to think it's not Shakespeare, they definitely depict passionate, devoted love between two men. Now, at this time, most poets wrote sonnet sequences to women. It was a thing that a poet did. They wrote sonnet sequences. But apart from Shakespeare, there's only one other poet who wrote a sequence to a man. That's Barnfield, George Barnfield. Basically, Celia and Rosalind run away together. Everyone notices, everyone knows that they love each other, and they say, "Oh, she would have died rather than stay behind her." And when I looked at the suicides, the joint suicides that couples in modern India have committed, they often use this language in their suicide notes, saying, "I will die rather than live without you." It's a common thing for lovers to say, and I cannot live without you, and so on and so forth. So knowing all this, none of the courtiers speak up for them, though they comment on it. They comment on the relationship. in the forest, Rosalind dresses up as a man, Ganymede, and everyone has, lots of critics have pointed out that Ganymede is the name of the Greek god Zeus's male lover. And Celia at first is quite cheerful about this, about Ganymede and Oliver, but after Orlando, sorry, and then she points out that Orlando starts flirting with Ganymede. And Rosalind says, Rosalind, who is Ganymede, says, I'll pretend to be Rosalind and you woo me. And he agrees to that, and they actually kiss as well, as we are told. And then Celia points out he's not being faithful because he's kissing somebody else. He's kissing somebody he thinks is a boy, and Rosalind is also worried about it. The interesting thing about it is that throughout the play, Rosalind and Orlando never meet on their own. They're the only couple in Shakespeare, I think, who never meet alone. Celia is always present, and most of the time she doesn't speak. Now, if you were the actress playing Celia, you have to decide what you're doing through these long scenes. How are you looking? What expression? Because she's there all the time. Then Rosalind asks Celia to pretend to officiate at a marriage between them, between these two men. So it's kind of, we see enacted a same-sex marriage. The two men, Ganymede appears to be a man, and as far as Orlando knows, he is a man. So then Celia says, I cannot speak the words. Now, what does that mean? I cannot speak the words. It could mean that she doesn't know the words, but it turns out she does know them, because after a while she does do it and she does say them. So it just means that she just can't bring herself to say it. Now, the thing is that in Elizabethan England at this time, this kind of marriage with witnesses, just the couple and a witness, was considered a troth plight. It was equivalent to a legal marriage. So we actually do see this same-sex marriage on stage, what Orlando thinks is a same-sex marriage, and it becomes right. And this, by the way, is Celia's behavior of Celia saying, I can't do this. This is Shakespeare's own innovation. In the original source from which he got the story, Celia is a very active participant, and she suggests it, in fact, and she wants to help with it. And then after that, Celia decides to marry Orlando's brother. Again, a very odd marriage where we never see them together. We never see them say anything about loving each other. We never see them together at all till they appear and get married. And even Rosalind is shocked and says, like, how did this happen? It's like the fighting of two rams. Suddenly they decided to get married. So in the, again, Shakespeare's source, we see Celia saying that she's fallen in love with him and sighing over it and all of that. None of that happens here. And then Celia just falls silent. She decides to marry him. We never see her, she never says that. And we just see her getting married, and she never speaks another word. So I think these silences are very interesting. And what is going on here? I don't want to spend too much time on this play, but basically I argue that Rosalind is also, once Celia gets married, she has to hasten her own marriage too. And Rosalind is kind of aware that Orlando is behaving in a strange way, because she says that if he goes to the neighbor's bed, she'll go to the neighbor's bed, and he says, why would you go to the neighbor's bed? To look for you there, which means that he would have gone to he may be in his male neighbor's bed. And this is the kind of hit at him for kissing Ganymede, I think. So basically what we see in As You Like It is that these two very strong, independent-minded women, their agency is limited by the social setup. They even have money, they can buy a house, but they can't live alone. And at the end, basically they are married off, and when they're married off, both of them are disinherited. This happens in a lot of plays at the time. Rosalind's inheritance passes from her father to her husband. And so the social collusion here is both in the surrounding people doing nothing to help them, and secondly, it's kind of built into the system. It's systemic collusion because of the money passing to the men when they marry. And that, of course, is one of the main reasons why Queen Elizabeth refused to marry. Queen Elizabeth I refused to marry because she would have lost the power that she had, or she feared that she would have lost the power. But then, even a man in the most privileged circumstances cannot always be safe from social collusion against him. And Hamlet is a good example. He's a prince, he's an only child, he is very brilliant, he is highly educated, but none of this helps when society decides to turn against him. When his father dies, society decides to go with the uncle who has taken over the throne, and so the society, everybody, the whole court, all the courtiers, think that it's in their best interest to collude with the uncle. And Hamlet says, I'm netted round with villainies, right? He feels as if he's trapped. Denmark is a prison, he's trapped, he's in a net, he's in a snare. And it's not just because of Claudius, who is the villain, but it's because of everybody. Hamlet's mother, she remarries within a month of her husband dying. She tells Hamlet to forget about his father. All the courtiers accept Claudius as king. No one speaks up for Hamlet's rights as the son of the dead king. And Hamlet says that Claudius popped in between the election and my hopes, so he's aware of it. And worst of all, he's deserted by everyone. His own friends from college collude with Claudius. So his college mates, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they agree to spy on Hamlet for Claudius. They act as spies. They carry Claudius's letter to England, which tells the English king to kill Hamlet. We don't know if they know what's in this letter, but still they do that. And then there's a family, Polonius's family. They are the worst of the lot. So Polonius is clearly acting for the king. He knows Hamlet from childhood, but he doesn't care at all for him. He only talks to him to find out what he's thinking. And he just obeys Claudius, and he's very well rewarded for it. And then Polonius's daughter Ophelia, who is Hamlet's girlfriend, she also spies on Hamlet for Claudius. Her father tells her to do it, but she could refuse. There are a lot of disobedient daughters in Shakespeare. There's even a book called Disobedient Daughters, right? So, but she is not. And Polonius's son Laertes is a childhood friend of Hamlet. Claudius favors Laertes, he tells him, you can do whatever you want. What wouldst thou beg, Laertes, that shall not be my offer, not thy asking. Your father is like the hand that feeds me, that feeds the throne, hand feeding the mouth. And so it's clear to Hamlet that all of these people are in conspiracy against him. He's like almost completely isolated, but not completely, because he is kind of doomed. His father's murderer is the king. He can't save his own life, but at least he has his friend Horatio. So he has one friend, and that friend prefers to support him. He's a poor man, but he has nothing to gain from supporting Hamlet and everything to lose, but he stands with him. Like the Roman hero after whom he's named, Horatio. He stands alone against the majority, which is a very difficult thing to do even today. When you are, say, to stand with your disgraced or cancelled friend, very few people do that because you can lose your reputation. Society believes that the lies against them, and it's a difficult and admirable thing, and that's what Shakespeare kind of depicts in this friendship. So Hamlet is very fortunate to have this one faithful friend. In Measure for Measure, which I believe some of you are reading, Isabella, I've made this argument that Isabella is a female intellectual, and she's a parallel to Hamlet. She's a female. She's very different from him in some ways. She's a Christian, a very devout Christian. He's not, and so on. But in other ways, she's similar to him in being a female intellectual who argues with great precision, just as Hamlet. And at the end, she suddenly, the Duke bullies her, almost gets her imprisoned, everything. And then at the end, springs on her this idea that he wants to marry her. And she thought he was a friar, and so she suddenly discovers that he's not, and that he has all the power. He's the Duke, and he wants to marry her. So she stands all alone, one of the most famous silences in Shakespeare. So like Celia's silence, at the end, she doesn't accept it, says yes, no, and some directors have her alone on stage at that moment. So she's alone, and I think her predicament is worse than Hamlet's in a way because she's a woman. And so it's more difficult in some ways, and she's, again, like Hamlet, surrounded by all these people. And now I forgot to mention her brother. So there's the man who wants to rape her, the man who wants to forcibly marry her and is deceiving her, and then there's her brother who wants her to submit to the rape so that she can save his life. And many people have criticized her for this. Many critics have criticized her for this, that her brother's life should matter more to her than being a virgin. And what they don't seem to realize is that A, she's a nun, and she really believes that she would be endangering her soul by doing this, first thing. And second, equally important is that she could easily get pregnant. And in the play we see that a woman gets pregnant by having sex before marriage, and the man is condemned to death. So she would be destroying her life in more than one way. Yeah, so she doesn't have any friend, and romantic love is in lots of medieval Greek, of course, and also Roman and in lots of medieval Greek, of course, and also Roman and medieval and texts after that also. Think of Tennyson, for example, whose long poems, Elegy for His Friend, he says, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," one of the most famous lines about love, but he's talking about his male friend there in a perfectly, and I don't think it's homosexual at all, it's just, he really means that. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Whether it's a friend, it's the same thing. And Hamlet talks about this to Horatio. And maybe, I took a course once called Hamlet. I designed a course called Hamlet and the Bhagavad Gita, in which I we read both the texts and looked at the parallels between them. So both, you have these two princes who are facing a battle with their relatives, their close relatives. In Hamlet's case, his uncle and his mother, a conflict, what to do. If you kill the uncle, you're also widowing your own mother, and of course Arjuna. And then the advice that is given here, the advice that is given about being a person of steady wisdom in the Gita, who is not easily swayed by passion, and that's exactly as Hamlet describes Horatio, as one in suffering all, who suffers nothing. So I found a lot of interesting parallels between the two texts. So one of the patterns that Shakespeare throughout his career explores in comedy, in tragedy, in history, not just Shakespeare, other dramatists of the time too, is that of a woman who is falsely accused of adultery by her husband and others. This pattern probably comes from the religious plays that dramatized Mary, Virgin Mary, being accused by when she gets pregnant, when it happened. One pattern is the woman is actually guilty of adultery, and in that case she gets killed by the end of the play. Yes, almost always. A famous example is A Woman Killed with Kindness by Thomas Heywood, right? And then the other pattern is she's accused of adultery, but she's actually innocent. And in all those options, she gets saved at the end. She's saved, and not just in plays, and poetry too, in Spenser too. You know, something or other, some lion, some angel, something happens to save her from her husband, and he doesn't kill her, and he repents. So the audience had definitely the idea that virtue, and we see this in Indian movies too and Indian literature, virtue will protect a woman. Her virtue will be her shield, and she cannot be killed. Her husband wants to kill her, but he can't kill her if she's actually innocent. And of course, it's a very dangerous idea that virtue will protect you, because then the husband can do whatever he likes and think that, well, if she's virtuous, she'll survive. But no, she won't survive. And so Shakespeare realistically shows in Othello that that's not true. She won't survive. And up to the end, up to the last moment, the audience in Othello would have been expecting Desdemona to be saved at the last minute, because that was the literary convention. They would have been expecting that something would happen to save her at the last minute. And she even kind of comes out after she's been supposedly killed. She comes out to say something, to speak. And so you think, oh, she's going to survive. But no, she doesn't survive. And so it would have been a real shock, not to us, but to the audience of the time, when he manages to actually kill her. So Iago and Othello are friends. Iago, of course, is famously a villain who deceives Othello for no apparent reason. Othello into believing that Desdemona is having an affair. Now, Othello has various options at this point. He could divorce her, and he thinks of it. He says, "I'd whistle her off and let her down the wind to prey on fortune." Desdemona is aware of this, and she says if he divorces her, she uses the word divorce, though he would shake me off to beggarly divorcement. Then she would either become a beggar or a prostitute or commit suicide. What would she do? Because she's left her father. She married this man against her father's will, and she doesn't think she can go back. In fact, we get to know that her father is dead. She doesn't know that by this time. So he thinks of that. But then he decides to he decides to kill her. And I was the first to point this out in an early essay, that social collusion, nobody intervenes to help her. And one of the people, most important, I think, person is this guy called Lodovico. He seems to be a very minor character, and most critics had paid no attention to him. He is her relative, she calls him cousin, a relative from Venice, who she's in a different city with Othello in Cyprus. And so she's isolated in Cyprus. She doesn't know anybody there. They all know Othello, nobody knows her. This often happens to women after marriage. Marriage is very local, where the woman moves to the man's house, city, etc., and it becomes isolated, right? So she's totally isolated, but then this guy, her cousin comes, her relative comes from Venice, her own city, and she's very delighted to see him, and she's very happy. Now, in front of him, Othello curses her, calls her devil, and finally slaps her. And Lodovico is shocked, and he sort of mildly intervenes and says, please apologize, please call her back, she's leaving in tears. And Othello says, come back, mistress. Yeah, he wants you to come back. And Lodovico says, no, I don't want her to come back. I'm just telling you. And then Othello says, oh, she can turn and turn again and weep crocodile tears and so on. He just insults her even further. And then Lodovico doesn't say anything. He falls quiet. He doesn't speak to her and say, come back with me to Venice. He doesn't challenge Othello. One of the things done at the time, he challenged him to a duel or something. He doesn't do anything of the sort. And after they leave the room, both of them, then Lodovico asks Iago, how could this happen? I thought Othello was so noble and so wonderful and so virtuous, and how is he behaving like this? Iago, being the villain who has done all this, of course says, yes, he has changed and he's mistreating her. But he says a very interesting line, which is, yet would I knew, would means I wish I knew, that stroke would prove the worst. That means something worse is coming. I wish I knew that this slap was the worst thing. Now, this is a warning to Lodovico that he should help his cousin. And he even tells Lodovico, go after them and see how he behaves. And Lodovico doesn't. He doesn't go after them. He doesn't try to speak to Othello alone or to Desdemona alone. He just does nothing, basically. He just expresses some shock. That's it. And then a scene where he has come to dinner at their house. And he behaves in this very distant and formal manner. They're walking with him after the dinner to see him off, and he says, no, don't, I beseech you, don't come any further. And he says, Madam, good night to her. Madam, to his cousin, I humbly thank your ladyship. Now, what can she say to this? So she no longer calls him cousin. Now she says, your honor is most welcome. So he's put this formal, cold distance between them and not shown any interest in her predicament. So she's left on her own, and now the next scene, she realizes she's going to die. She seems to sense it. And because she tells Emilia, her lady, to put the wedding sheets on her bed and to wrap her in them as a shroud if she dies before her. So she now knows that the last hope is gone. There's nobody who is going to help her. And at that moment, she makes some remarks about Lodovico, which have puzzled critics throughout, when she says this Lodovico is a proper man. And one of the meanings of proper is handsome. And so critics all say, Emilia takes it to mean that. She says a very handsome man. And Desdemona says he speaks well. Now, this has been called the strangest line in Desdemona's role, that at this moment, while she is so worried about Othello's behavior and talking about that, suddenly she says a comment on Lodovico. What does that mean? So some critics have wondered, was Desdemona attracted to him? And is she regretting having married Othello and not married a man like Lodovico? And some think the whole line is mistakenly attributed to her, and Emilia should have said that line. So I suggested that Desdemona is using the word proper ironically. In fact, in another play, Beatrice, in a very similar situation, when a man, Claudio, accuses his fiancé, Hero, of talking to a man at night from a window. Hero's cousin, Beatrice, who stands up for her, she says, talk with a man out of window, a proper saying. Proper means here the opposite of proper, like it's nonsense. So it's clearly being used sarcastically. And then Beatrice asks her boyfriend, Benedict, to kill Claudio. And when he says, no, I can't kill him, he's my best friend, then Beatrice says, oh, that I were a man for his sake, or that I had a friend would be a man for my sake. But she says none of the men are willing to defend her cousin, are willing to defend Hero, and she as a woman can't do anything about it. So she says, I'll die a woman with grieving, which is essentially what Desdemona also says, that she'll just die with grieving. There's nothing she can do. And then in the last scene, when Othello kills Desdemona, she fights for her life. She denies his accusations, but he overpowers her and he kills her. They're alone. Immediately after he kills her, Emilia enters. And she then risks her life. He's standing there with a sword, and he's just killed Desdemona. And he threatens her, but she screams aloud, and she says, I will die, but I will expose this murder, she calls out. And then she has this great line where she says, "Thou hast not half that power to do me harm as I have to be hurt." So in the face of all this social collusion against Desdemona, Emilia is like Horatio, is the only one to stand up for her and risk her life for her. And look at that line, "Thou hast not half that power to do me harm." The difference between harm and hurt. You can harm me, like physically harm me by killing me. There's a difference between harm and hurt. But I have much more power to be hurt. I have been so badly hurt by you that I don't care about the harm you can do me, though you can do more harm to me than I can do to you. It's an absolutely stunning line. And then everybody else arrives, including Lodovico. And Othello openly says, yes, I killed her, and she had committed adultery. But notice here, what I notice is that he doesn't openly kill Cassio and admit that, yes, I killed him. No, why not? He doesn't kill Cassio openly. He employs Iago to secretly kill him. And why does he do that? Because here I think it's because a man killing another man is something for the law to deal with. Whereas a man killing not just any woman but his wife is seen as a domestic matter. It's illegal and it's wrong, and everybody would say it's wrong, in England at least. In Italy, actually, at that time, if you killed your wife for adultery, you could be justified. In England, you couldn't, but it would be viewed as something different from killing another man or killing another woman. So, for example, in The Winter's Tale, one of the last plays where this pattern recurs of the woman falsely accused of adultery, Leontes, her husband, says, now whom he's thinking by himself, whom should I kill? Should I kill him? Should I kill her? And he says, no, I better not think of him, because in himself too mighty, and look at this line, in his parties, his alliance. The other man who he thinks is having an affair with his wife is a king, and he has a lot of allies. He has parties and alliances on his side. So I can't kill him easily. He has power. But so let him be. I'll take some revenge later on him. For present vengeance, take it on her. They should not laugh if I could reach them, nor shall she within my power. So it's made as clear as possible here, it's laid out. She's in my power. I can kill her. She doesn't have any allies. She doesn't have any parties. He does. So I can't kill him. So it's made very clear that murder is not just simply murder in all cases. You can murder people more easily who don't have allies and who are in your power. And it's less easy to kill somebody who has allies. Right. So why are wives within their husband's power? And this I saw when I was working at Manushi. Because marriage is often sort of like a prison with glass walls. Everyone knows that a particular man is mistreating his wife, but it's seen as despite being semi-public, it is seen as being a private matter between the two of them. And even when they're physically surrounded by other people, they're seen as occupying a private space that other people will hesitate to disrupt. They may disrupt it, but they'll really hesitate to do so. And this becomes completely clear in the last scene of Othello, where Emilia is murdered, after Desdemona is murdered. So at this moment, everybody is questioning Othello, why he has killed his wife, and Emilia reveals, he reveals that Iago had told him that Desdemona committed adultery, and he mentions that famous handkerchief, which was the proof. As soon as she hears that, Iago's wife Emilia puts two and two together, and she says, that handkerchief, my husband Iago told me to steal that handkerchief and give it to him. So she reveals, and he tells her, Iago's telling her, be quiet and go home. But she ignores him. She says, perchance, Iago, I will ne'er go home. She knows that she may never go home. Either he'll divorce her or he'll kill her, right? She says, and Iago draws his sword. Now, this is a wonderful moment of stage. So, as I said, silences in Shakespeare matter a lot, but so does the stage action. So, it's not always in words. So, at this moment, Othello is standing there, and Iago draws his sword. And Othello has just killed his wife. Iago draws his sword against his wife. And another man, in case we've missed this moment because so much is going on stage, another man actually says, fie, your sword upon a woman. Like, how can you, it's so bad to draw your sword on a woman, right? And then at the same exact moment, Iago stabs Emilia and Othello tries to stab Iago. So two people are trying to kill two other people. Now other men, several other men standing around, they could either stop one or try to stop both. but what do they actually do? Another man immediately takes the sword away from Othello, so he can't kill Iago. And so Iago is able to kill Emilia. Nobody takes his sword away. He's able to kill Emilia and run away. And then the stage direction is the Moor runs at Iago. Iago kills his wife. Not Iago kills Emilia, but Iago kills his wife. And that word is repeated again by another man who is standing there, who says, the woman falls, sure he has killed his wife. He's gone, but his wife's killed. This repetition of the word wife is to kind of say, right, he's killed someone, but whom has he killed? His wife. So it's not just as if their responsibility is somewhat lessened by the fact that she's his wife. Now, at this moment, Montano takes the sword away from Othello. Why doesn't he take it away from Iago instead? Between the two of them, Othello is going to kill the villain, right? So, and the villain is going to kill the witness, the witness who is the witness to the revealing the evidence. Which person is more important to save at this moment if you can only save one? Why does he take the sword from Othello? Now, it isn't, I wouldn't say, it's not that Montano consciously thinks, oh, I would rather that the wife gets killed. No, he has no time to think at that moment. So it's completely spontaneously, without conscious thought, but it is the spontaneity which comes from a social pattern. The idea that the man killing his wife is somewhat less important than a man killing another man, which is a criminal matter. Yeah, and more criminal, both are criminal matters, but one is more somehow than the other. So Iago must be preserved for the state to deal with, and so must Othello. But Emilia, he has killed his wife. She's sort of a somewhat different category. And she has actually just then refused the role of an obedient wife. Iago repeatedly told her, be quiet, and she says, it is proper I obey him, but not now. She tells the gentleman, no, I'm not going to do what he says. It is proper I obey him, but not now. I have to reveal the truth. Still, he continues to perceive her as the wife, as the adjunct, rather than an agent, as she's acting here as a free agent. Another example from earlier in the play of a man, how a man is dealt with who does something criminal is, or something bad, is when Montano himself, and so he was involved earlier, when Cassio gets drunk and causes a lot of chaos from getting drunk. Cassio is the guy whom Othello suspects his wife is having an affair with. He gets drunk. So Othello wants to let it go because he's his friend. Cassio is his friend. But he says, no, I cannot, because for the sake of others who are watching, I can't exonerate my friend. I have to punish him, and he does punish him. So when you're dealing with another man, you have to be careful of the justice system. You have to pay attention, right? So basically, in Othello, two men murder their wives. One is white, the other is black. And in the other three plays, the murderous husbands are also white. The result is the same. The pattern is the same. There's escalating violence. In Iago's case, right there in that scene, from verbal abuse to threats to hitting to murder. And witnesses don't intervene to stop this violence. So other playwrights at the time who wrote these plays about women falsely accused of adultery, if you look at the titles of those plays, there's warning women not to trust their female friends. Women beware women, a warning for fair women. These are the titles, right? But Othello, in Othello, Iago actually issues a warning to husbands. The play is almost a warning to husbands in the audience not to behave like this. Because Iago actually says, and this is not something Iago would normally say at all, but it's a sort of out of character moment where Iago behaves almost like a chorus commenting on the action. He says, thus credulous fools are caught. When Othello is believing Iago's nonsense, lies, and it faints away, Iago says, thus credulous fools are caught, and many worthy and chaste dames, even thus, all guiltless, meet reproach. Now, Iago doesn't like women at all, and everything he says about women, apart from this, is negative. This is the only thing. He would never call women worthy and chaste, all worthy and chaste dames. He doesn't believe in that. But this is the one moment where he says this, because the dramatist, I think, is pointing out to us, to the husbands in the audience, or that husbands shouldn't trust their male friends in this way. Okay, so then Merchant of Venice again, Shylock is again isolated and surrounded by all these Christians who hate Jews, and Shylock clearly says he wants revenge because Antonio has mistreated him and slandered all Jews and so on. But the Christians seem to hear this and not hear it at all. They hear it and they don't react to it at all. They just go on to the next thing. It's very interesting if you read these speeches where he says that they just don't hear what he says at all. For instance, that famous speech, hath not a Jew eyes, and if you prick us, do we not bleed, and all of that. Immediately after that, they don't react to that at all. They just refer to something else. They go on. But I noticed this one moment in the trial where Graciano, another character who has abused Shylock a lot, says, can no prayers move thee? And Shylock gives this one-line answer, no, none that thou hast wit enough to make. Wit means, at the time, intelligence. Nobody had commented on this line. It just seems like a throwaway line. But what does it really mean? So my explanation is Shylock is suggesting, yes, the right kind of plea can move me, but you don't have intelligence to make the right kind of plea. So the right kind of plea, of course, would be an apology for the way Shylock and other Jews have been treated, including by Antonio. Antonio, even when he's pleading with Shylock for his life, never apologizes. He just doesn't connect the two things, even though Shylock has told him, but he doesn't connect the two things at all. And so he never apologizes. You would think that would be the moment, but no. So anyway, we're running out of time, so I will skip over this. The Antonio is in love with younger men, and then so one of the groups I look at is old people, and this is a group I noticed that Shakespeare consistently shows old people as mistreated in play after play. Sometimes it's just a passing thing, and sometimes in King Lear it becomes the central issue. But in many plays, they mock old people, they trick old people, they enjoy playing pranks on them and making fun of them and so on. Desdemona, for example, I think nobody had ever mentioned this, that Desdemona actually not only discards her old widowed father, and she's his only child. Now, he's objecting to her marrying a black man, but a lot of fathers at the time, almost every father would have objected to that. And a lot of other fathers in Shakespeare object to their daughters marrying other men, white men whom they don't like. But he dies of a broken heart. And after she leaves him, she never once asks about him, she never once remembers him. And when Othello looks at her hand and he says, oh, your hand is really warm, and she says, it yet hath known no grief nor felt no sorrow. So she has felt no sorrow about leaving her father. So basically, Simone de Beauvoir says, the old in the modern world are treated, old age is treated as a shameful secret. And this is we call this the early modern period. This is when it's beginning, this discarding of old people, discarding of the past as something you can just throw away. King Lear, of course, is the best example of that, the famous example of it, use of the word old, just like the use of the word Jew as a taunt and a put down, the sort of ultimate, you know how teenagers say, oh, you're so old. But Gondrel and Regan are not teenagers, and they are adult women, and yet they use this as the sort of unanswerable argument against their father. But in this play, Shakespeare starts reversing the pattern of social collusion. In this play, we find that a lot of people speak up for the powerless, important people like Gloucester and unimportant people, and they pay a very heavy price for it. Gloucester is blinded because he gives shelter to Lear, and the turning point, as many critics have pointed out, comes when Cornwall's servant, one of the villain's servants, stands up to his master to prevent him from putting out Gloucester's second eye. Now, it doesn't help. The servant is killed, but then we see that people start, this is a turning point because we start seeing that most people, though they are scared to say anything, are actually on the side of the victims. And they comment on that. Wherever the old Gloucester, blind Gloucester goes, everybody is sympathetic to him. And we see a lot of nameless, ordinary people, an old man, a gentleman, etc., helping them. And at the end, so I was saying that the talk is called Cruelty and Forgiveness. At the end, when Lear asks her to forgive him, Cordelia, the daughter whom he's thrown out, Lear says, your sisters hate me, and you have some cause, they have not. You have cause for resentment against me, they don't. And Cordelia replies, no cause, no cause. I find this such a wonderful line, because most of us, we think we have cause for resentment, especially against our parents, and people who are always looking for a cause, like Othello, it is the cause, my soul, before he kills his wife. Right? When you're looking for a cause, you make yourselves and others miserable. I'm talking about a cause in personal life. You make yourself and others miserable. So unless your parents are abusive parents, resentment against them is particularly useless. And King Lear has been abusive by throwing her out without a penny, etc. Still, she doesn't hold that grudge at all. Now, all the support that they get, the victims get in King Lear, it doesn't prevent murders. It doesn't prevent the Cordelia's death or Lear's death or Gloucester's death. But what I would argue is that it provides us with consolation, which is not simple-minded. And now lots of students and so on, others also, critics too, they find the play very bleak because it ends with all the good people dying, almost all the good people dying, and there's no happy ending coming. But I think no religion and no philosophy claims that virtue will be rewarded. And the whole point of virtue is that it's its own reward. It's not supposed to be rewarded. The only consolation you have is that virtue exists, that Cordelia existed. That has to be enough, right? I cannot but remember such things were as were most precious to me. Another character says. So, you know, you remember that this precious thing existed, and that's, you know, all that there is in life, really. So in the last plays, like The Winter's Tale and Cymbeline and so on, Shakespeare evokes the figure of the Virgin and her female friends. Now, throughout the Middle Ages, the Virgin and the female and the female saints were images of female power that everybody encountered throughout Europe, in churches, everywhere, right? And with the Renaissance, with the Reformation, all of this disappears. In England, these images were knocked down, especially images of the Virgin, because they didn't believe that women should have power and be queens and so on. So, and at the very moment that, and Mary, of course, was a figure created by popular devotion. Some of the doctrines about Mary that were believed and painted in famous paintings only became actual doctrines of the church in, say the Queenship of Mary. Only becomes a doctrine in 1950, as late as that, whereas it was being painted from the 15th century onwards and believed in. So at the very moment that Mary was unqueened in, just to show you some images of Mary without the baby as a goddess-like figure, this is the birth of the Virgin. So the education of the Virgin. So being suspected of adultery, visiting her cousin Elizabeth, and as an author, as a female author. She's the only female author in the Christian Bible, and painted here by Botticelli, writing that song that she sings. Coronation. So you see how she's sitting on the same level as Jesus. They are sort of together, equally important, on the same level, and he's putting the crown on her head. They're kind of the male and female parallels of each other. So in the 50 years before Shakespeare's birth, and his mother came from a Catholic family, images of Mary and the saints had been destroyed. So the Virgin Mary was unqueened in England, and an actual queen, Henry's first wife, was also unqueened, and after that 2 more queens were beheaded, right? So there's a unqueening going on at the religious level as well as at the social level. And in his play Henry VIII, which its other name is All Is True, Shakespeare depicts the unqueening of Catherine of Aragon and shows how no one stands up for her, but the whole play is deeply sympathetic to her. And one of his last and greatest plays, The Winter's Tale, he retells the same story of the wife falsely accused of adultery. And this wife pretends to die, then she lives for 16 years with her female friend Paulina. So like, he comes back to the pattern of the beginning, like Rosalind and Celia living together just for we don't know how many, a few weeks or a few months. These 2 women live together for 16 years before she comes back, and she comes back to meet her daughter. She's waiting for her daughter, whom the king had thrown out. The king and the son also died. Now Shakespeare brings the daughter back to life, but not the son back to life. So the son not coming to back to life means that the daughter becomes the queen, right? Just like Elizabeth's brother dying meant Edward dying, Henry VIII's son dying meant that Mary Tudor became queen, and then Elizabeth became, 2 queens came to power, 2 daughters came to power, right? So the play ends with Hermione reappearing, posing as a marble statue of herself. And one of the few plays where this secret is kept from the audience. So the king doesn't know this is a statue, but we also don't know. So the first audience would have been really startled when the statue comes to life and moves down. It looks almost miraculous because we think Hermione is dead. So this is revealed to us, and it sort of recalls for the audience, her daughter kneels to her, and the statues of Mary, people used to kneel to them. Then the Protestants said that that is wrong, you can't kneel to them. And so she comes back, as Anne Boleyn could be said to come back through her daughter who became queen. And Perdita describes her daughter is described in this way. Women will love her that she is a woman more worth than any man. Men that she is the rarest of all women. That kind of description was only used for the Virgin Mary, the rarest of all women. And she's a woman more worth than any man. Okay, so Shakespeare basically repeats that pattern of the falsely accused woman, and he explores women's history, the history of suffering, of resistance, of empowerment, and he retells imaginatively the story of Henry's wives by bringing this woman back to life, this particular woman back to life. And repeats this pattern of two women living together. So, yeah. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that extremely thought-provoking and entertaining discussion. We would like the audience to ask the questions if you have any, or comments if you would add to the discussion in any way. Thank you. Any questions? That was a lot to absorb, but I would, while people may think about comments and questions, if I could sort of start the ball rolling, because all throughout you did mention Angelo, and throughout I was thinking of Angelo and Isabella and what happens at the end, and cruelty and forgiveness, the absolute cruelty that we see Angelo inflicting upon Isabella, and then at the end she forgives him. And that sort of is another extremely eloquent moment in the possibly Shakespeare's works as a whole. So it's a very striking moment. You do not expect that to happen. And you also find that sort of strange bond taking place between Mariana of the Moated Grange and Isabella. And then, I mean, she's they are like this doppelganger figures, right? So Isabella, Mariana takes Isabella's place, and Isabella's virtue is saved. So I was thinking if you could sort of talk a little bit about Angelo, and also the fact that we see Angelo's torment just before he makes that indecent proposal, and he sort of falls in his virtue, falls from his own eyes, as it were. So if you could sort of comment on that while people think about further questions.
No, you're quite right. It's a great moment of forgiveness, and the Virgin Mary was worshipped primarily as because God definitely, and later Jesus too, was seen as angry figures. If you look at Michelangelo's Last Judgment, you see this, the figure who sends you to hell, and the Virgin Mary was looked at the figure who will always forgive the sinner and throw her weight on the side of the sinner, both in art as well as otherwise. So these virginal figures, whether it's Isabella or Cordelia, are the ones who forgive. There's that, and Angelo is like the most ironically named character, like Hardy's angel later. His conflict, one can sympathize with it up to that point. Then afterwards, he seems completely hardened when he is willing to just condemn her to death, do a brother to death. He could easily save her brother, but he condemns him to death. That I find very hard to forgive. So it is amazing that she forgives.
And in the interaction, we were talking about the formal, aspects of literary text, which kind of also justifies our discipline in a certain way. So I also wondered about this play. We do not get any of these asides or these soliloquies which allow us a glimpse into Angelo's inner psyche after that point. He just becomes an opaque thing. We do not have access to any soliloquy. There's no soliloquy given to him after that point. So that seems to be a very sort of interesting thing. Why is he not given a soliloquy after that point when he is sort of arguing with himself about whether he should do it or not?
Perhaps because, what would he say after I'm gone in so far that should I wait no more, returning bloody years go. I mean, what can you say when you're doing this one thing after the other? He thinks he has killed a brother that he promised to save, and how can he justify? I mean, how would he justify that? It would be very hard. Yeah, he could have a Macbeth-like soliloquy, but he's not being turned into the hero either. If you gave him those kinds of soliloquies, then he would become a hero like Macbeth, which the play is not doing.
Then the Duke will have a real problem.
Which the play is not doing.
Yeah.
It's also not a tragedy in that sense.
Yes,
no?
it's not, yes. And I think that is so fascinating formally also about that, because it's sort of, that's what stops it from becoming a tragedy almost. Because we have
whose tragedy? It's
whose
more
tragedy?
hers than
yes,
his.
it's more hers than his.
And
yeah.
he would upstage her if he got more soliloquies.
Exactly. Yes. So.
It was a very interesting discussion, I think we all agree. And as I was listening to your talk, I was thinking about this entire phenomenon of having newer theories, newer approaches to literature come up. And at times I felt like in many senses, there is this whole emergence of human rights literature coming up in today's times, that we are adopting a lot of newer jargon, putting a lot of newer approaches to already existing texts where, this sort of things might not have been, in their intention when they wrote those sort of stuff. And of course, there are narratives which kind of keep that in mind and create such, tales like in contemporary times. But what would you say about us using pre-existing texts where, this sort of legal frameworks or this sort of an understanding of the world did not, come into the picture when writers were writing these texts, and even when there were these strains of feminism or gender justice and all of that in question. And also, like when you were saying about this no cause, like there's this whole fixation on causation, non-causa, or cause. What was the cause of something for a legal, aspect being taken up? So I was very curious to know what would be your take on such approaches to literature.
Well, see, every age uses the language of its own language. So rights is definitely not a major primary kind of language in Shakespeare's time. The language of rights. He does have a sense of people having rights. Of course, they have. For instance, Edmund's whole argument that as an illegitimate son he should have a right, and why does he not have a right? So, he may not use that word, but it's very clear that that's what he's arguing, that it's unfair as an illegitimate son, he shouldn't have any rights. So the concept is there in one form or another. So not as a human right, but as a right of a son, as a son he has right. So the rights are more in terms of your position, vis-a-vis your family, vis-a-vis the state, vis-a-vis, the poor have rights for the, and it's also strongly accompanied by duties, that the two go together, right? I think maybe in the modern age the concept of duty falls away and you have the rights without the duties. But I think in most societies before that, the rights are accompanied by duties. So you have duties to your parents, but then you also have right to the inheritance. So Edmund feels he's not getting his rights, so he has no duties either. And is that the right approach, the correct approach to take is the question that the play is raising. So yeah, as far as no cause, yes, I suppose you could play with the legal idea there, but I think at that it's not being used in that legal sense, because he says sisters have some cause, you have no cause, you have some cause, they don't. The idea is they have cause to hate me and you don't, because they don't have cause to hate me because I gave them everything, but you have some cause to hate me because I mistreated you. And she says no, for her that's not him. She's given it up, she's let go of it. And I think, yeah, a lot of therapy, for instance, modern therapy, not all, but some kinds of therapy advises you not to let go of things, to cling to grudges. And I think the position being taken here is that not just by Shakespeare, but many other writers in other cultures too, is you have to let go in order to live, instead of clinging to a grudge, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sneha, for that. We have one question and a couple of comments on the live stream, so I will read that out. From Nandita Basu, very interesting. Thanks a lot to the organizers. And she also says, I read your book on Shakespeare, but it is altogether different to hear from you. Thanks. And Rohini Mukashi says, I was wondering if Professor Vanita would like to speak about the sonnets, especially sonnet number 20, where Shakespeare's stance on the young male lover or friend is so ambiguous and tantalizingly complex. Thank you, Rohini, for that question.
Yeah, sonnet 20, of course, is the turning sonnet, the turning, because in those 19 sonnets before that, Shakespeare's persuading this young man, whoever this young man is, to get married and produce children who will look like him and be beautiful and young when he grows old, right? That's what he should do. But even that's a very interesting argument for reproduction. It's not the usual argument, you have a child so the child can look after you in old age. Isn't that what everyone says now? If you don't have children who will look after you in old age. He doesn't say that. He says, no, you're so beautiful, you need to produce somebody who will be as beautiful as you when you lose this beauty. This is not a normal argument for producing a child, but so he's already focused on his beauty. And then sonnet 20 is the turnaround, right? The master mistress of a woman's face with nature's own hand painted as thou, the master mistress of my passion. Now, this sonnet is kind of wondering, are you just the master of my passion? Are you partly the mistress of my passion? It's a very sexually charged sonnet. And at the end he says, but about nature, since she tricked thee out for women's pleasure, by giving one thing to my purpose, nothing. Nature as she wrought thee fell a-doting, and nature as being a female was creating you as a female, but then fell in love with you. So here you have one female falling in love with another female by adding one thing to my purpose, nothing. So she added basically the male genitalia, which are, but now mostly this has been read to mean, oh, this means that I can't do anything. Well, what nature has given you, I can't do anything with. But Eric Pickwigney gave a great interpretation, another interpretation of this, which is the word nothing. The word nothing at the time, the penis was called thing. It was called thing, I don't know if it still is now. And then when you add the word no to it, no thing, nothing, that was a word for the vulva. No thing, nothing. So nothing doesn't just mean nothing. Nothing is one of Shakespeare's favorite words. In King Lear, it comes up a lot. But nothing, by adding the no to the, no thing means no penis, you have female genitalia, right? By adding one thing to my purpose, no thing. So it's basically saying, it could be saying your male genitalia is to me like female genitalia, right? So that's the other possible erotic meaning. And then in the later sonnets, of course, there's a lot of erotic stuff going on, so which adds to the weight of this possible interpretation. Yeah.
Back to the in-person audience, if anybody has any more questions or comments.
It's not a question per se, but an observation. Like when I saw that title of the talk, the immediate thing that came to my mind is the relationship between Prospero and Caliban and Ariel. So the relationship, like the nature of the two relationships varies. One is very submissive, the other is revolting. So, and the end which both of them faces are also very contrasting. Ariel is freed and Caliban is most likely left on the island. So I actually expected a tempest in the talk as well.
Well, if Caliban is left on the, as you said, it's not clear, but if Caliban is left on the island, then that's great. He loves the island for him. He loves the island and he wants to be there, and he doesn't like these people, and they are leaving. So he'll inherit the island, basically he'll inherit the island. They are treated differently, not just because Caliban revolts, But Caliban tried to rape Miranda. Now, of course, some post-colonial critics might justify this by saying, well, I don't consider rape to be a tool of resistance. And so he said that he wanted to rape her, and so that is when Prospero cast him out. Otherwise, he was being raised as Prospero's child, along with Miranda. He was being raised and educated. But when he tried to rape her, that's when Prospero threw him out from that position which he had. So yeah, that's how I want to be.
Any other questions, comments?
Okay.
We don't seem to have any more questions on the live stream either. So, shall we wrap up? Yes, absolutely. Before we wrap up, I also need to thank everyone. This a very informal but heartfelt vote of thanks, not only to the audience for coming here, and not only, of course, to Professor Vanita for this absolutely heartfelt. You rendered everybody speechless.
That's all good.
Yeah, thank you to the speaker, thank you, and thank you especially, I would say, to Queen, who suggested that we meet here. I think it was a great idea. And to the people here who have stayed back past their usual time to help with the technical setup and all the stuff that goes on here. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you, and let's hope we will meet again in the next installment of the seminar series.
Have you books out for you now?